I love it.
Okay. Are we ready? Looks like. All right. Good evening, everyone. It is now 6:35. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will you please stand if you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Andrew Benson.
Here.
Ruth Groff.
Here.
Ron Winlosi.
Here.
Joseph Wetmore.
Here.
Edward Levine.
Here. So, item number 4 in our packet is the public hearing, the draft for the 2024 countywide shared service initiative plan for pilot countywide rapid medical response program.
Whoa.
Eesh. Okay. Someone like to make a motion to open.
I'll move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
So the public hearing is open. I'd like to take this opportunity, first of all, to introduce yourself to me, please.
Sure. My name is Michael Sager. I'm the Director of the Department of Emergency Response.
Okay. Is there any background you want to give us here before we move on to opening this up to the public?
Absolutely.
Can we do it up? Can we do it up at the mic so folks at home can hear us too, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
The grant application that we've submitted for the Shared Services Program is for a rapid medical response. And the Rapid Medical Response Program is designed to have 3 strategic units throughout Tompkins County that can respond as a first responder for any medical emergency call that's made to 911. The basis of this program is to support the community-based services, many of which are struggling in serving in that role where they respond as the first responder to a medical emergency while they're awaiting a transport unit.
Okay.
And everything's based in Ithaca, right?
I'm sorry?
Everything is based in Ithaca and then goes out?
So no, what we're envisioning is a unit somewhere in the Lansing area, somewhere in the Caroline area, in either Newfield or Enfield, because the data shows that those are the areas that would have the greatest need for it. But as we evolve through the program, we'll be paying particular attention to the data, and so those units might need to move around as the calls change and the volume of calls change.
Do you have any specific, when you say in this area, that area, I'm not asking for a specific address,
Right.
but, we've all been, or some of us have been through when, before convenient care came about, there was a tremendous concern that your only medical area was across the lake, and that since then we moved over here. Do you have any idea where in Lansing this would be, like up on the village, or?
So we've talked about the Lansing unit rolling out of our department headquarters, but if there's a more strategic location that the data shows would be, more appropriate for that unit to be staged at, we're certainly open to that. We want this to be very fluid, and as time goes on, if we see that there needs to be improvements or we need to change the staging location, then we're absolutely open to that.
I would imagine you're using the same pattern that the sheriff's department uses. When they have patrols, you see where all the activity is, and they try to concentrate a bit more over. This is a pattern of behavior, but you can't predict carjacks and everything, but I understand the response time. Does anybody else want to talk before we open up to the floor to the public?
I just want to say some of the statistics I've been reading about Lansing are really scary. Between 2017 and 2021, the response time rose from 12 and a half minutes to 14 and a half minutes. And those minutes count when you're talking about serious problems. I'm also seeing something here that I really don't like, which is a 37% non-response in Lansing, in which they just don't come at all. And when I see those kind of numbers, I don't see this as a luxury. I see this as a necessity.
I would also say that those numbers aren't a reflection on the people trying to get there.
That's correct.
No, it's a system that's not built out enough to be able to
Maybe
handle it.
I think you're not putting words in your mouth, but it sounds like that the system's overloaded.
Yes, absolutely. And we need this to fill in the system's missing spots.
So having gone through the agonizing departure of the ambulance crew many years ago, because of a variety of different reasons, some of those financial, some of those others, which was tragic in my opinion. What, and maybe Mike Sigler can also add to this, because you're also working with this, what numbers are we talking about? I mean, the bottom line is we understand that there's a need, but how much you think that the Lansing would be on the hook for? And also, what do you want from us tonight if we choose to move this forward?
Well, so the first thing I'd like to point out is that the numbers are in the packet for the proposal that we're submitting to the state. Those are numbers, those assumptions that we've put into those, into the presentation would be based on if Lansing were to, or any community for that matter, establish their own paid ambulance crew or their own paid rescue crew. So those numbers don't reflect what the contribution might be from Lansing to help support this program. I'd also like to point out that the legislature has not yet decided on what the cost-sharing models might be, so it would be premature for me to speak to that because we're going to be talking about it actually tomorrow during our public safety meeting. So I don't know what, if any, contribution Lansing would have.
I want to point out, too, that, that number is going to be huge to establish your own, ambulance service. And that's not what we're even talking about here. This is not that. It really is apples to oranges. This is not an ambulance service. This is you're having a heart attack or you're having a stroke, and we're going to get somebody to you faster than if the ambulance were to respond, and quite a bit faster. I mean, there are some calls, and Mike has these numbers, where we're not even getting a response to people, and we need to fix that. The county, listen, it was a pretty good expense. It's over $600,000 to get this thing up and running. We're doing the first year because we couldn't come to you and ask for that money this year because you're doing your budget right now and it's on your agenda. That, and we really wanted to get this up and running, so that's going to happen. But we're looking at this going forward, and we're hoping that you're going to consider one of these numbers going forward. And we're not just asking Lansing, we're asking Caroline, we're asking all these places that are underserved, unless they already have an ambulance service. And then we have to kind of figure out how to handle that. But the numbers are much lower than, I know you guys may have had a large number in your head, but they're not. I mean, they range, I think they're in the packet, anywhere between 20-something thousand and 58,000, I think is the top. So it's,
So those are the numbers, yes.
yeah, and that's what we're going to work on this year, before you have to do your budget again, and we'll see if we can form some kind of partnership there.
Well, those numbers are, in my opinion, critical because that was one of the obstacles when this was pursued many years ago to form your own ambulance crew, and that was not cost effective. In fact, it was a deal breaker, so to speak, many years ago. So consequently, they had to rely on other services and outsource that, along with the fire company, amongst others. But having said that, these numbers, I think, are important, what the real numbers are. I understand what if we had to do this, but that wasn't a realistic number, really. So these are realistic numbers, not to exceed, let's say, 60,000 a year.
No, I would say that's.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, without knowing really what the legislature decides, but, and again, I'm not sure what document you're looking at. So there's the grant application that has numbers in it, and then there's a presentation. I don't know if you have the presentation I made to the legislature with some cost-sharing models. So it would just be helpful to me to know which numbers you're talking about, because if you're talking about the grant application, those numbers, they're not inflated, but they're certainly show a very clear picture as to what it would cost an individual community to independently establish these services. So those numbers are much higher than whatever cost-sharing model could be out there. So I just want to make sure that I'm referencing the right document when you're asking me a question.
We're all been through the grant application.
Okay.
If this happens, if this happens, if this happens.
Okay.
But as representatives of our citizens here, we have to make sure that
Absolutely.
that the numbers we see are going to be something that they can absorb also.
Sure.
And I'm not suggesting not do this.
Sure.
But I think when people look at this, they want to know what those numbers are. And if you're looking not to exceed 60,000, I think that might be a better number to discuss than other ones. And I would try to say, where's the worst case scenario?
Right.
Because once you're in, you're in. Is there a way that municipalities can opt out?
I mean, I think that's something I've spoken with my leadership team about. I mean, frankly, even communities that have EMS services, it doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't ever need this service because of how mutual aid works. And I'm sure some of you know that with regards to both fire and EMS. But if you can just imagine that if in a community that has their own ambulance service, if all those ambulances were on a call and there was a call for service, we would certainly not decline it. So this is something that has to be considered very carefully by the legislature.
I mean, that is one of the things that pushed this forward was, Trumansburg, for example. They're covering a much larger area. They're getting more calls. They're finding themselves go down to the jungle more often too, because the city just can't keep up with that. So they were feeling a lot of pressure, and they were saying, we need to do something. And this was a bridge idea kind of thing, that this could address some of these holes and plug some of these holes. But for Lansing, it's like, this is brand new. I'll talk about the budget later in my report, but out of the budget this year, this is a brand-new initiative. We got to this probably in under a year, which you guys know, right? That never happens. And it's probably one of the top 3 things we've done in the budget this year, to just get this thing off and going, and then now the conversation can begin in earnest about how we're gonna kind of pay for this going forward, although it's already paid for this year.
I just want to mention the kind of 3 levels that we're talking about. The first level is the fire department comes to these calls, and they're trained first responders, but they don't have all the medical background and they don't have all the medical equipment. What we're talking about in this proposal is referred to often as a fly car, in which it doesn't do transport, but it has a lot of that medical backup stuff that the fire department doesn't have. So it's like halfway between the fire department and an ambulance, and the ambulance actually does transport. And so we're getting people on the scene right then who can administer a certain amount of drugs and can do a certain amount of tests to stabilize somebody at a quick response, and then we can take more time to transport them if needed. And that's the critical time. If we get someone there within 7 minutes, which I know is about the time you're trying to get that number down to, we can save a lot of lives that way. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to change the response time from this 14 minutes we're looking at now to 7 minutes to save lives.
And if I could just point out that most communities, the community-based services don't respond to the lower level calls, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but we're envisioning this unit being dispatched to lower level calls. So that really does 2 things for our community. The first thing is if a person transitions from a lower level to a more high acuity level call, they're going to be assessed by a first responder that can then ensure that the appropriate transport agency is coming with the right skill set on the ambulance. The other thing that it's going to do, if it remains a lower level call, sometimes these patients don't need to go to the hospital. So if our first responder unit can arrive, assess them quickly, and maybe just assist them in getting back into a chair, they don't necessarily need to go to the hospital. That keeps the ambulance available for other members in the community that may need it.
Mm-hmm.
The responders, more than one go.
So the way we're envisioning this is that our unit we would have 3 units with 1 individual per unit, but they would be simultaneously dispatched with the community-based rescue. If the community-based rescue is unable to answer the call, then we're going to get there and we're going to answer it. Maybe the community-based rescue gets there, they have 1 person, they need assistance, our team will be there to help. Especially on a cardiac arrest where you're doing CPR, having 2 people would be helpful. And then if there's an event where they're just not able to answer, then we're going to be there. So, but if they're able to answer the call and they can free us up, then we can go back into service because we're going to be covering a large geographical area that will go across many, many towns as opposed to just 1. So.
Okay. Any questions from anyone here? Kind of jumped the gun, but we're not going to leave the public out. No one else has any comments or questions. Does anybody out of the public here have any questions pertaining to this? Okay, if not, yes.
I don't really have a question, I just want to point out, if you look at the response times and the time of day, makes a big difference. Not every facility allows people to leave work to go on a call. So that's very hard for the rescue to get out during the day from 7 o'clock until like 2:30. So but with bangs being right at the 5th end, they house right at our station. That's huge. But yes, I think what you guys are doing is going to be absolutely awesome. Because we always can't always get out.
So just some background, this is Jamie Spencer. We'll be listening to him shortly, but he is a volunteer fireman. Just like Dennis Griffin also is a volunteer fireman. So they speak of experience. which I think is critical as we try to go and try to make the world better. So it's good to have the voice of reality in the room too. So thank you.
And this service would be operating Monday through Friday from 7A to 7P. That's what we're looking at now to help the community-based services.
You're running paramedics,
We're going to be running EMTs.
EMT, but they can't push drugs, so.
They can't necessarily push drugs, but they can do certain things. Obviously, they can do Narcan, they can assist with nitroglycerin. They'll have the defibrillator, obviously oxygen, because really the majority of the calls are BLS level calls anyway. But interestingly enough, we're actually getting interest from paramedics, meaning we can't hire them as paramedics, but they might have that skill set. They can operate as a paramedic, but it's because I think this has excited the EMS community because it really does provide them a lot of great professional opportunity.
Every town needs help.
Yeah. And I think it's also really important just to note that this was done in partnership with a steering committee of 19 community members with the sole purpose of making sure that we don't do anything that compromises your existing community-based services. This is really to augment them, to maybe help take a little bit of pressure off so they can continue to thrive. We're very blessed to have the services we have in the county, but if I felt that this was going to do anything to compromise them, I wouldn't even be asking it to move forward.
Gentlemen, do you have any other questions? Because I think you bring a important, shall we say, some important intellectual capital to the conversation. So, yes, Dennis.
For the board, it would be a nice idea if you invited the chief of the department to explain how we are doing things in the department. We are doing some things to make this better and give you an idea how this town is operated under the emergency service.
Correct. Thank you.
I have a question. I don't see any of villages in the cost sharing plan. Is there a reason for that?
I'm not sure I quite understand. Could you just,
Well, you put, just, this just lists the towns.
okay.
I mean, it just, when you talk about cost sharing, will the villages be included in that, or is it just the towns?
I would think the villages too. The whole, and that might be a gap, and maybe that's something we need to go back and look at our presentation on, but yes.
Well, there's ways you can include them. Now, there's ways you can include them without including them.
I'll point out in the back, they were part of the panel that was working through this, so they're involved.
But if we do a town-wide, and you know this, but I'm not interested. If we do a town-wide, then the village is included.
I see, okay.
Just like with Cougar Heights, theirs would be the town of Ithaca, because villages have to be attached to a town. Our
I see.
village of Lansing is attached to the town of Lansing.
Okay.
So we all know this up here, town-wide, as opposed to, and town-wide is everybody in the town of Lansing, includes the village.
Okay, that's very helpful. It's a learning opportunity for me. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No, it's a share of
Yeah.
information back and forth.
Yeah, this is great.
I mean, I think it validates, the fact that there has been some deep thinking about this as opposed to, OMG, we need to do this. As we always say, we have the second mouth kiss the cheese, not the first. So it sounds like this has been fairly vetted, but I'm not going to editorialize anymore. Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? It's always a good sign, public hearing being silence. Anybody want to move to close the public hearing?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank you for
Pleasure.
coming and talking to us about
Yes,
this.
I'll just forward
And we'll be
talk.
in touch.
Okay, very good, thank you.
All right, moving along. We have a presentation by Jamie Spencer. Doing double duty.
Yeah,
You also may know that Jamie spent 30 years working for the town.
33 years.
Thank you. And if you ever had a chance to see the mulch being processed, I was down there watching him one time, and I swear to God, I thought that the bulldozer was going to flip over because it almost like he went vertical up as he got pushing the pile up. And I said, this guy has no fear.
I do now.
So please.
Yes, my name is Jimmy Spencer. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I know Ed knows me by Spanky. That's my nickname. I lived in Lansing for 54 years. I now reside in Groton. In that 54 years, I worked for 33 years at the Highway Department until retiring last June. And I was talking to a buddy of mine over in Candor, and they
they did a local law that would allow you to ride your side-by-sides or four-wheelers with certain requirements. A, working headlights, taillights, mirrors, and insurance, a helmet. And the hard part of it is over Candor, like they'll cross the road to get to another trail. We don't have trails here. It's all farmland. And if not, like I say, you can't ride on state roads. You can cross them, you can go like 1,000 feet down to cut over to get to, say you want to go from Common Road down to Drake Road. You can run that down and cut over. What I'm looking for the town to look into is do a resolution or a local law that would allow people to ride, because you can't, on a side-by-side, you can't register it. You can't license it. But even a four-wheeler, you can register and license it, still can't put it on the road. But as long as everybody abides by the local law of staying on the town roads and not being jack wagons, 25 miles an hour max, which I like to hear my stereo, so that's as fast as I go anyways, and just putt along and go over to your friend's house or do whatever you want to do. I would like you guys to, look into this. I know you got the paperwork, and the paperwork is not, I was gonna redo it, and I obviously didn't, to make it more accommodating to Lansing versus Candor. Because like I say, they have miles and miles of trails. We don't have that luxury. So I just wondering if you guys would, look into that and see what you think.
Any questions for Gene?
Any idea how many people, take a guess, in Lansing might have ATVs?
Probably 300,
Thank you.
I would say, yeah. Right now, I mean, the other day I drove down to Morabito and I got fuel. Now it's coming out and, well, I had to run the state road to get down to Bauer Road. And I had a trooper behind me. I just pulled over, trooper went by, waved, and away he went. And I was talking to, I did talk to the sheriff, Osborne. He was unfortunately not gonna be able to make it tonight, but he said, if anybody wants to call him, he'd be more than gladly to talk, and he's all for this. Because like he said, he goes, we allow bicycles on the road. You can't register a bicycle. And so, it's a catch one, but now they got the e-bikes. Well, I tried getting around an e-bike the other day. That thing was doing 57 miles an hour. They do. You put it just, and like I say, 25 mile an hour max, and just abide by the town's laws, and everybody will get along fine. Last year for Father's Day, or this year for Father's Day, in town of Canada, there's 46 side-by-sides that went down to Punk's Restaurant for Father's Day breakfast. They just all got together but they have a club. See, we don't have a club here. Not yet, we're working on it. And I think it's just something that everybody says I'm nuts for even bringing it to you guys. I go, well, I'm nuts not bringing it. What have I got to lose? Nothing.
Okay. Any questions for?
Yeah, and this might not be a question for you, it might be for Mikey, I'm not sure, but this talks about town roads. How do county roads figure into the equation? Is it something like people would have to be like, oh, this is a county road, know the difference?
Personally, me, county roads are junk anyway, so.
All right, fair enough.
I mean, they really are. But yeah, like I say, you just gotta heed the law. You don't drive down the state roads. I mean, you can cross them or go like 1,000 feet and then cut over. Like if you want to go to Beach Road or Drake Road, you cut down and cut over. Then say you want to go up to beautiful Saturday morning, you want to go to breakfast. Hop side by side, it's a nice day, go down Beach Road, hop on Drake Road and go up to the East Shore, have breakfast and then go home. So that's what I'm looking for. I just, like I say, just want to bring it to your attention, see if you can look into it and see what you guys think.
So if I understand correctly, all you're looking for is basically the same rights that a bicycle has, in a nutshell?
Actually, we're safer than a bicycle.
Oh, I know, but I mean, you
But
want
yes,
the same
yes,
rights.
absolutely, yeah. And you've got to have mirrors. And like I say, I mean, I drive mine from Groton all the way over to Indian Field Road. But I stay on the side roads and Car comes, I pull over, wave around. I do not have turn signals, but I did take driver's ed, and they taught me how to do this, that, and this, but I have taillights, so I don't have to worry about this. But yeah, I mean, I have daytime running lights, brake lights, everything,
Right.
it's like driving a car, it really is. And I just like, they're fun, better on gas than a car.
Yep.
So, yeah, I just wanted to bring this to your attention and see what you guys think. Yeah, I'm sure you're gonna table it and think about it and come up with a conclusion. And if you want me to come back, Ed has my number, he can call me and I can come back with more questions or answers or anything.
Well, I can say this, they're already driving up and down Salmon Creek Road on a regular basis.
That's me.
And
Well,
then
it's a side road. I mean, it's.
Yeah. And then my question to Guy is, do ag vehicles count under this, or do they just get to drive? Because I know some of the farmers use those to monitor their fields and bring equipment back and forth, so I assume they get to run on town roads under ag rules?
Well, technically an ATV is not a legal vehicle on a state highway unless it's approved by either the Commission on Motor Vehicles or by local law by a governing municipality that has access to the road. And the use of the road is limited to what the segments that are needed to connect from trail to trail or to get and use open areas.
Right.
You don't have the authority to just open your public highways for use by ATVs, UTVs, and whatever. I would agree, because I have one that has a license plate on it, and if there were trails that were designated here, like they are in the North Country, it would be easy to do that. You have to get the license plate and everything. But it's probably on some levels, if you're talking about full access to the road, you're talking about the state updating the V&T law, because it's pretty old when it comes to this. It doesn't even recognize the difference between an ATV and a UTV. Farm vehicles that are used as farm vehicles have the right to access and use their farms under ag district laws, and it's an open question whether that trumps or doesn't trump. But what is going on in Candor, because this is not the first community that I've worked with that has looked at this, is pretty much law enforcement really doesn't get involved unless the ATV driver, like any other person using the road, is violating the rules of the road. So that's one major distinction between bicycles and ATVs, because if you work downtown, I can tell you 1 in 1,000 obey the rules of the road. Red lights are not stop signs to bicycles. I actually have a habit of counting how many each year I see that obey the rules of the road. Last year I got to 4. So what he's saying is factually true, but the real solution, other than identifying areas that are available for that kind of travel, maybe connecting with the snowmobile groups to co-use the trails.
Right.
Then you could use the roadways to connect from trail to trail or open area to open area. But a blanket over all your roads wouldn't meet the requirements of the V&T law. But, like he said, it's something you gotta chew on and look at and study. It's no different than studying any other resource. And it really is, or should be, part of the overall town trail networks, the snowmobile networks, bridle networks, walking trails, motorized trails. They're all in the same family of transportation and recreation. So it's something that I think the town does need to look at and understand the rules for. And I supplied you with a lot of materials that I had dug up in 15 and 16, just to let you know that there's a lot you can do, but it's also really complicated to get it right.
So it sounds to me like we should send this idea to the Trails Committee and let them put that on their agenda for when they, I know they've got a lot on their agenda, but, you know, just add it to your agenda of things to work on.
What authorization would the trails have if you're talking about things on roads? I don't know, unless you're gonna allow them on trails.
I
Are you
would,
saying that they could be on trails also?
I wouldn't go on the trails. I would not take mine on the trails, only because, okay, say it's wet, it's muddy, and you're buttoning it up, well, that's more for Pat to do, and his team. You know, that's not fair to them. The other thing, like you say, with the, you have, if it passes, you guys pass it, it's like this with Gander, you have to take your slow-moving sign off, unless you're a farmer. Farmers have the slow-moving signs. So they come off, you have to wear a helmet, you have to have, you know, working white headlights, tail lights, and go from there. And like I say, as long as you're not being a jackwagon and you obey the laws of the town, whether it be a resolution or a town law, whatever you want to do, there should be no problems.
The thing is that we're a right to farm community.
Right.
So the farmers have a right to be on the roads.
Yes, but I was talking,
Regardless of what speed they go.
Right.
And I think that's important because a lot of people didn't realize that and they got frustrated that they're behind one of these and they have a right to be on there. Guy brought a guy with the snowmobiles. Snowmobiles cross and you can see them all over the place. There's one, I think, on like the Buck Road, Bauer Road. I think
Yep.
up there on Sills Farm, they have and if you're familiar with the snowmobile trails, they are all over
right,
on that, but they're only intended for snowmobiles.
that's right. And the problem is they pay insurance for the snowmobile club, so they do not want side-by-side for four-wheelers on there because they make ruts and you get those skis in a rut. I don't know if you ever rode snowmobiles before. You go skis in a rut, you're going for a hayride, and it's not fun.
This is why I'm a little bit concerned about bringing in the trails on this, because
Right.
this is going to be on the roads.
Yeah, but like I say, you cannot run state roads, like Guy says. It's illegal. You can't do that. It's dumb. Couple of the county roads, it really doesn't matter. Just staying at, like, okay, when I leave my house in Groton, drop over Sharpstein, hit Pleasant Valley, drop over Buck Road, take a right. Now, I'm on the county road for quite a ways, but I turn left and go down, hit East Lansing, and I hit Searles Road, drop down, I go by Joe's house, and we're just off on side roads. You know, I think if everybody heeded what plan you guys come up with, I really don't think you'll see a problem.
Then you could gear to only certain roads.
You can, yes. I mean, if you looked at this, there are certain roads that are not, you cannot get on there. But like I said, where these roads are, I have no idea. I don't know Canada that much.
Yeah, I was not suggesting the Trails Committee would put them on all the trails. I'm saying the Trails Committee is looking at the town in the same way that this look needs to be of where would it be appropriate, how would we set up a plan of action to allow these on roads, not necessarily saying, oh, we'll just open up the trails to them, but you're looking at the town in the same way this needs looking at, is my understanding.
And I'm thinking, if we as a board want to pursue this, we want to kind of see, like, who should we charge with looking at this? And I think that's the most logical group to charge with it, unless there's another one that would be good. But I also like the idea of bringing the Trails Committee's sort of orientation to things like this also. So as that whole plan is continued, the motorized vehicles are thought about and included in it too.
So the Trails Committee is a working group. So what does this board, it sounds like this board, unless Margaret, you haven't spoken yet, want to chime in?
Okay. I'm listening.
It sounds, I'm not going to put words in my mouth, it sounds like this board wants to move forward and have the Trails Committee look into something. So we need to know specifically, what do you want the Trails Committee to do?
Exactly.
Okay, so as a working group, they need to be specified, like water and sewer, like anything else. What do you specifically, and only those things you want them to look into? I'm not asking for an immediate answer tonight, but we're having the conversation going, because this isn't going to go away. Okay, but start that conversation. And yes, Patrick?
Since this directly pertains to my department, I really don't think, in my opinion, it should go to the Trails Committee. Only because it's on specific roadways. It's not, has nothing to do with trails. It's pretty clear we can't use snowmobile trails because obviously those are crop fields for 7 months out of the year. So you're really only talking about roadways, town roads. So I don't see why it would be given to the Trails Committee.
I would agree with that, Patrick. I was sitting there going through my mind trying to figure out how the trails would address this, and I couldn't make the fit, so thank you.
Yeah.
So perhaps this suggestion could be, let's get your email, and you can leave it with Mrs. Munson before you go, and then we can distribute that to all.
I don't have email.
Okay. or whatever. How we get hold of you in case there's a question.
Yeah, I mean, you, like I say, you have my number, you can call me anytime, not anytime.
But I think you should give that number.
Yeah, I can.
To the town board members, because if they have a specific question.
Yep.
I think it might, and then maybe by next month, we'll have something to perhaps discuss by next month. Perhaps not, may bring you back in case there's other questions
Yeah.
for a few minutes.
Like I say, if you need me to come back, just want me to come back and listen, I'll come back. I don't have
Well,
to speak
this is
either.
all good input as far as what our parameters are.
Okay.
And that's fine, because the more trails, the more pathways, the more snowmobile trails we have, the more ATV, I mean, all these things are gonna be, they're gonna have their own thing, and I don't think, like I said tonight, I think there's a consensus that not all trails fit all uses.
No, right. I mean, like I said, the walking trails, I wouldn't,
Thank you.
I mean, have I rode on the walking trails? No. But I know somebody has.
Thank you, Spanky.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on. Number 6, budget discussion. We've had some changes. Ladies, would you like to come forward? Up to the microphone, I guess we'll have some input on some suggestions. Has everybody, I hope, had a chance and ask questions, and all the different department heads, anybody else that they had questions about? We'll go from there. And all these suggested changes, have they been woven into the budget so we see what the impact will be?
Not yet, no.
So we don't know what the rate will be, or does the rate stay the same and more gets from certain funds? Before we do that, I want another bit of information here. We all have this sheet?
Yes.
Okay. This is the thing we're working on for the debt service for the proposed highway department building. And this is for 2023. Chime in if I go off trail here. No pun intended. But this also, the intent is to go back 4 more years, so we have a 5-year average on certain things. Like for instance, if you look down here, the summary, you see where the A fund is 45.70%, B is 10.73. We go across to left to right. This is the proposed impact that each of these funds will have when they pay off the debt for the highway department building. Based on, is this based on hours of usage from employees, Mary Ellen?
I'm sorry.
This guide is based on number of hours of employees' usage for different departments?
This is based on pure payroll, just what they got paid, not the number of hours or anything like that.
Okay.
This is just pure payroll. That's what I started with.
And my point is, just an FYI to people, is that we were reallocating the distribution, at least it was suggested to reallocate the distribution for the 2024 budget. So some of the sales tax money would be diverted into these other funds. So please keep in mind that as you look at the fund balances, especially in the B and DB, since we cannot raise those taxes, is that if you start to spend down those amounts with other financial obligations like the debt service to the highway department, which I believe the calculation, I don't know since the rates are going up, but I think the first year was 900,000. And you can take the percents here. Once again, this is just, we don't have a hard number, but we see where these percents are. How much of an impact is that going to have on your B fund and your DB fund if these are obligations every year? And how much do you want to actually adjust and take more money out of those 2 funds? Or can those suggestions be postponed until later? We can go through all these if you want. I guess you can calculate what the impact would be right now, because at some point we're going to have to make this a preliminary budget and go from there.
Yeah, Jen's computer has chosen now to reboot, so.
Of course. Of course. Yes. I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign. But this also could be a tool for when you start to look at that.
Right. And the one thing to remember with this and the way it sits right now is this is all payroll. So if we're looking at debt service for the highway building, we would take out the payroll for courts and the payroll for the clerk's office and things like that. So the numbers could could fluctuate a bit.
And please keep in mind, if we don't use these figures, if we have to go more to the A or the DA, perhaps our friends that are in the village wouldn't like that very much for having to pay more for that service that they have their own highway department building. Don't know, but these are all things to think about when we talk about the budget.
Mm-hmm.
As we wait to
It's okay. We can get started. We can share a screen for a little while if we need to. We get into the accounting program though.
Well, do we want to go over these 11 items one at a time?
Sure. The only concern I want to know what the impact of that would be if they are actually turned into reality for the budget, but we can discuss them.
Well, each one, I think we can note, is this going to come out of fund balance, or is this going to come out of increased taxes? And we can ask which way we'd want to add that in, because I think that's the real discussion on each one, is where does the money come from?
Well, this is the chicken and the egg, right? It's like, okay, you put them in, you try it one way, see what the impact is, and then you say, maybe we should pull that out and do more fund balance. Should we say not, and just increase the tax rate?
Mm-hmm.
But until we start adding those numbers in,
Mm-hmm.
because one way you can do this is just add these numbers in and see how much, strictly on fund balance. That's one technique.
Right.
Another technique would be, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to go strictly with tax rate. And unless the calculations have been changed, 1 cent is usually $14,553. Now, they may have changed since last year, but I don't think so. So that's roughly $15,000. You know, so if you were going to use the tax rate, you needed to raise 30 grand, you'd have to roughly do 2 cents. Keep that in mind. It's already at $1.97. Put up 17 cents, I think. Right? So that's for the tentative. But yeah, go through them and see how. It sounds like it's not a matter if you want it; it's just a matter of how you're going to pay for it. But go ahead. Who wants to start? All right. Number one, the analysis there was looking back at what the history was on this. Keep in mind that this is the court clerk's salary. Keep in mind this also is one person. Keep in mind this also is less expensive than hiring 2 people with full-time benefits. But the amount it looked from the past, Mary Ellen, was that it actually went up a bit. And there actually may have to be a budget mod towards the end of the year for this, which I will get out in front of this right now, so it won't be a big surprise to people, that we may have to move some money over into that account because the court is busier. Talking to Judge Howell, they're busier. So consequently, that number went up more than was estimated.
So we're not actually talking salary, we're talking hourly time.
Yeah, and it's really more just to make it more correct. what's
Right, so
actual.
the term salary is a technical term saying we're paying them a flat fee, and that's not what we're talking about here. What we're
No.
talking about here is they're putting in more hours, so we're going to need to be able to pay for those hours.
Exactly, this is to account for the overtime hours.
Okay, that makes more sense to me
Yeah.
then, thank you.
Mhm.
Now, eventually, you may have to go back to 2 clerks. And right now, we have, Mrs. Muslim was gracious enough to have her clerk work 1 day there. So it sounds like it's transition, but you'll have more data next year and the year after to see where this really, where it goes. We okay with that? Number 2, Justice Personal Services, part-time clerk. I think we just discussed that, right? Isn't that?
There's a different clerk,
Yeah.
there's a different line.
Right, but it's
But it's the same situation.
Same
It's the
issue.
part-time clerk from my office that's going to go to full-time. She's going to go 1 day a week at the court office, so it
Okay.
gets charged to the court for that 1 day.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The gorilla in the room, technology. And this is something that it's increased from 72 to 15,000. I don't know where this is going, but it's not going to go away.
No, it's not. And let me look at I just thought of something. So that part of that is that we took some of what was in the technology contractual that was really more not contractual but equipment, and moved it to the equipment line. So that's not really overall increase. It's like moving
Oh,
it
we're
where
just
it was going to be
moving
more
between.
correct.
Okay.
Right. But the next, number 4 there, the technology contractual is increasing. Anyway, because of, the possibility of the new software for accounting, payroll, personnel.
Which I understand is going to save a lot of staff time and a lot of aggravation.
Lot.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ruth sat in on that demo, and it just,
Mm-hmm.
the capabilities are, it's not even a comparison.
Is that a straight A fund, or is that something that can be distributed from the other funds that also use that, like the code office?
Well, it is, I think it would be straight A, but
That's fine.
it is, it's the accounting software, and I am doing accounting for we are doing accounting for all the funds. It is payroll, we are doing payroll in all the funds, so, I don't know, does it just, but if it's, all of the other technology software is coming out of the same A fund as well for other technology software, right? For other.
And I'm okay either way,
So-
and I don't want to micromanage this too, so 3 cents goes here, 97 cents goes there.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's like, okay, right, so
Yeah.
there we go.
Some of it is, some of it isn't, it all depends on.
Yeah. So and that's one of those things that we can look at to make it more consistent. And it's also probably an area that the breakdown we had with the payroll, I could use something like that to say, well, our payroll last year was this, or we'll do the 5 years, and we can split that cost up that way. We can look at that, but
It's
again, we can split and split and split and spend hours and hours and hours and to what effect, I don't know.
The technology thing is fluid anyway, because you're talking about software coming out of this fund. We've got software in John's department. They're both software. They're both running on our computers, and we're taking them out of completely different places. So it's not, and I know we share the use of that. And so it's kind of weird to have a technology line that some of the technology's in, some of it's not, and,
I don't disagree.
It's
It's just the way it's been.
yeah, I understand. It's
There's
just,
a benefit to the whole town. I mean, it's.
both of
Yes.
these benefit the whole
Exactly.
town. John's stuff is really
If it's
necessary.
easier going forward, it's perfectly fine with me if you just dump it all into one.
Well, except we gotta have an A and B fund, because we're definitely, John's stuff is running off the B fund, not off the A fund.
Sure.
So it'd have to be at least, that split's necessary, because obviously, all the code enforcement stuff is B fund, not A fund. So it has to be that way, but I know you've got all kinds of software and all kinds of different deals and websites and stuff, and they're buried in different lines, and so you can't look at it and say, we're spending this much on our technology because it's buried other places. And I'm saying this mostly so the public realizes that when we're talking about this, that doesn't actually cover everything that we're doing technology-wise in the town.
No, not even close.
Right.
So it sounds like we'll keep that meeting. Let's move on. 5, the drop-in, sadly, it was closed for next year.
Yeah.
Is that part of the effect, and so not throwing stones at anyone, because of the programs that the school has opened up?
I think so.
It's indirect, it's directly affected because the school has now started
We have faith-based also that have been affected by that.
Yeah, and some other CPs, a couple other local, preschools that have been affected by it.
Yeah, because it is what it is.
Yeah.
So that's going to drop out for this year. Now, maybe this surge next year, the year after, and go from there. Okay, so far so good? All right. 6, zoning contractual increased by 100,000 for the zoning consultants. This would increase the use of available fund balance from 277.7 and change to 377.7 and change, almost half of the current fund balance.
I'm wondering, is part of the reason for using the fund balance because the idea is that this zoning consultant it'll be a time-bound sort of thing, like they'll work for a year, it's not a new hire, it's a consultant that will hopefully,
Rewrite our zoning. This is to update our zoning.
Are you asking him?
Well, whoever, kind of, like, that's the idea, yeah.
Well, you're
Just
looking
pick
at
somebody.
him, so I just want to make sure. that-
The idea is that it's time-bound.
Right.
You know, specific project,
Okay.
with a specific scope to end in a given amount of time. But, directing questions towards where we get the money from, that is definitely.
Yeah,
not-
exactly, yeah, no, right.
That's not
But,
fair.
you know, like, I don't want to plan, you know, I wouldn't want to say, well, actually, this is going to be a new role in your department that will then have to fund in years to come. No, this is,
It's to fund a project if that's what the town board wants
Yep.
to do next year.
that sounds great. Okay,
And
thanks.
and our fund balance for the B fund will still be within our target range of where fund balance should be for that fund.
Great.
Anybody else have questions? I would hope that you could hold off on this for a year, only because we're still looking for another planner, and we still have the consultant line of almost 30,000 in there. Also, the fact that as we're trying to build up this fund balance, we reallocated, and we've taken some of the fund balance out of the B fund and the DB fund. By reallocating that, that'll be dead down. And I would be on the side of caution to move forward, because we've seen how the zoning, we made some progress, but that's over 6 years. I don't see this thing being done in a year, and once you commit to it, you're in, which means if you have 100,000 and it still hasn't been done, or you still haven't pushed through, you're still committed to that. I would err on the side of caution and maybe revisit this next year. I would love to have the planner have a second planner and use a consultant first, and we methodically keep going through this zoning, because my experience has been Lansing is very methodical. They want to think about a lot of stuff, and they have every right to. And if they're going to be rushed on something, they're going to push back, and I don't blame them. I'm not against any of this, but I think it's the time frame to do this. May not be, especially when we're trying to get our fund balances back up, that I think this may, since we still have some in the consultant field, let's find out first. The other thing you can do is see where your sales tax is at the end of the year, come at the end of February. Now, coming in February, if you have a tremendous amount of surge, you can revisit this. You're allowed to do that. And maybe that's the time to do it. Or maybe you say, you put that to one side and you say, you know what, we found somebody. Okay, you can still do the search for that and be more methodical. You have lots of options. I mean, once this budget is set, it's not written in stone. You can adjust it as we all see what budget amounts. That's my 2 cents. If the rest of the board wants to do this, I respect their wishes. I would not, but that's simply up to the rest of the board.
I'd like to know what John thinks about this, if you have any opinion.
Yes. My opinion is that I'm trying to stimulate conversation with this board. There's been a lot of interest from certain members of the board. Some of you are very anxious to work on zoning changes. Others are more reticent or are not opinionated. My point is that this takes money, okay? And if it's a serious priority for the town, fund it. Okay? I think it could, I don't think personally, my professional opinion is that I'm not seeing a surge of development that's going to preclude us from making zoning changes to become better in line with our comprehensive plan, meaning I don't think that we're at high risk due to such development pressure that we're losing community character or valuable resources in a year's time. I think Ed's correct. It could wait if the board wants to think about it. There's no reason that we couldn't search and put out RFPs and get a better idea of what it will cost, but I'd like this board to be deliberate. If working on the zoning is something you want to do, then we need to fund it, because I can't do it in my department with my current resources. If you'd like to wait, let's wait, but please understand that you're making that decision. You're the driver's seat.
Understand.
And the same holds true for the Conservation Advisory Committee. They've submitted a budget request as well. If you're going to have committees and you want them to do work, your level of commitment is demonstrated by how you fund them.
I'd like to respond to, first off, the contractual line of 30,000 is not just a slush fund here. It's already spent on training for ZBA, training for planning board, software expenses. there's already a budget for that spends it all out. We have been working on our zoning for about 5 years now and have gotten a couple of big zones done, but have really hit a slowdown because it takes a lot of time and effort. And our zoning's got several problems. One of the problems is it's not user-friendly to our community. We've started the process of reworking our zoning so that you can look at a zone and understand everything you can do in it and not have to search through pages and pages of what you can do in every zone and figure out which ones apply to your zone. And if I'm building in, one of these residential zones, I don't need to look at what happens in the ag zone. I don't need to look at what happens in the lakefront. I need to know what's allowed in my zone alone. And so we need to finish that process of revising our zoning so it's more user-friendly. We also need to update it for a lot of the things that are kind of going on both in planning worlds in which they say these are things that we should be doing in our zones, and just practical things like we're starting to build sidewalks. We have no sidewalk law. We have no, and some of these are really just things that can get plugged in by a consultant and get us started. And I think that's what this is going to do. They're not going to fix our zoning for the next 20 years. They're going to catch us up on a lot of the work that we need to do to make our zoning more user-friendly to the community, more understandable to our residents, and up to date with a lot of the changes that have happened that we haven't had time to keep up with. And what this will do will get us jump-started up to getting a lot of what the comprehensive plan suggested we do, get it cleaned up so that it's more workable, and then we can start the process, which I would envision the next step would be to do the comprehensive plan process over again after this zoning has been updated. I think doing it now is important. I listened to the planning board. They're frustrated that our zoning hasn't been updated. Many of those members spent a lot of time on the comprehensive plan committee, put a lot of good ideas in, and are waiting for them to be implemented. And we passed that in 2018, I think. And they're sitting there saying, why haven't you done these? Because we don't have the staffing to get all that little stuff put into our zoning. And that's what the consultant would do, is they'd take our comprehensive plan, they'd work with a committee that we put together, which would have planning board members, residents, town board members, and guide them to get our zoning in a much better position than it is now. And I think waiting does a disservice to our community. I think it's really important we move forward on that. That's why I asked for this, and I'm really advocating it strongly.
And I would want to, I'm sorry.
I would like to add in that it does concern me, Joe, that we're talking comp plan. If the town is considering updating its comp plan within the next, 2 or 3 years, I think you'd be better served by putting your funding right towards that. Okay, because that's going to come up with more zoning changes. They always do. That's sort of the point. And then you'd be trying. I'd hate to see us invest $100,000 into zoning changes and then roll right around into a comprehensive plan update process that probably just makes more of those recommendations. So I think that should be carefully considered.
I think it's an ongoing process. None of these are done. You do your updates, and then you do a comp plan, and then you do updates, and then you do a comp plan. And we did our comp plan 5 years.
If you're just talking amorphously in the future, I completely agree. I
Yep.
just want to be clear that if you're
Yes.
setting up a timeline and a path, if we're going to update our zoning and then roll right into a comp plan, I would advise it to flip-flop those two.
And I'm not saying we're going to jump into the comp plan immediately thereafter. I'm saying that will be the next step. Once we get this done, we'll start that process. I'm not saying that it needs to be fast-tracked. At that point, I think we need to feel our new zoning so we can see where it needs to change.
All right, that's your opinion. I like to have the opinions of other people because this isn't written in stone how it's going to turn out. Robin, how do you feel about this?
I think that the idea of, all right, I have a bit of chocolate in my mouth. I wasn't expecting to be called on. I'm okay. I think the idea of catching the rest of our zoning up to what we were able to do so far and just cleaning it up, making it user-friendly, making it readable, sounds very attractive. And I think that that could be done and managed in a way that isn't kind of getting ahead of ourselves and making changes that then we're going to re-change, but just cleaning up what is there and making it more usable.
Okay.
I'd like to see more input from the public. And I would agree that it is difficult to understand if you don't read everything and know the background, and because not that many people get involved with town stuff.
Only when it's built in their backyard.
Yeah, all of a sudden,
And they
oh my
notice it.
goodness, oh my
And they
goodness.
notice it.
Yeah, so I'd like to see that part really expanded if at all possible.
I'm not understanding what, public input in what? I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand.
In our comprehensive plan, in any zoning changes,
Mhm.
yeah, that kind of thing. I think people are shocked when because they don't know what's going on.
I would see that, we can't do a zoning update without public input. Absolutely.
Well, I was going to say, I'm agreeing with what everybody else said, when Joe said it's difficult for, I've actually had talked to two people in the last week who have tried to go through the process, and they were so confused, and it's like, they said, you need to make it clear to the general public of what these zoning laws are. And so I kind of globbed onto what Joe said about that. It's like, we do need to make it easier, and I think that should be done sooner than later.
Okay, Joe?
I think I've said a lot already, but if you want me to talk more, Ed, I can.
That's okay.
No, you've proven that time and time again. My personal opinion is I don't disagree with any of this. What I'm concerned about is the extra $100,000 and the B fund coming out when we're taking money out of that quote-unquote surplus. That concerns me as we're trying to build up the fund balances in the other ones. And maybe, like I said, that doesn't mean we can't methodically go through each zone. But I think if you're going to be aggressive about that, my personal concern is, and it won't be me, it'll be other people on the board who have to address this, is that you're making the town vulnerable if your funds are bled down too much. There are ways to methodically look at this to see where your sales tax is when we close the books, as I said before, at the end of February. There are ways to see what does the public want. Do they want a new comp plan instead of going to the zoning again? In a perfect world, you would do it every 5 years. In a perfect world, there are some that actually do that because you see in other areas where a lot of people aren't concerned because they have a high rent percent. I haven't seen a contentious comp plan at the Village of Lansing ever. It's 73% rent. And having said that, we are making tremendous progress. We did the ag zone, right? We're doing other stuff now. We're moving the mountain, which before was like the immovable object, which we should be commended for whoever has done all the hard work for doing that. But it is going to take a long, tedious process. And I don't think, once again, if the board you want to say yes, I'll say no, that's okay. We'll move on because I've learned through my experience that if you don't have a majority, you move on and go on, and the ones that do have the majority, that's fine. So if everyone wants to do this, then we'll add $100,000 into that fund, and we'll move on to item number 7.
May I ask, how did we come up with the 100,000 number? Is there some backbone to that one?
That's kind of the estimate.
Pretty back in the napkin, Ruth.
I'm sorry?
I said pretty back in the napkin, honestly.
Okay.
You know, prices on everything have changed a lot in the last 3 years, so the board at the last town board meeting had kind of asked me off the top, that's the number that came out, so. Right.
Let's just quickly go over what the process is going to be. If we agree on this, what we're telling John is this is a priority. He's going to work up an RFP. We're going to put it out sometime in the spring. We're going to find out if that $100,000 number is optimistic or way out of line, and we'll have a decision to make at that point of, can we afford this? Do we have to work it down to a smaller project, and what have you.
Right.
So it's not the money spent as soon as we put it here. It's telling John, this is a priority. We really need to get our zoning updated.
And I want to echo a point John made, that if we do want this to be a priority, we need to put our money there.
Yes.
We can't just say, we want to keep working on this, you just have to keep working harder. We need to put the money there
Right.
and
Yeah.
say, this is important, let's
Yes.
move it forward.
I would do just the opposite. I would see if this is a priority first, and then allocate the money afterwards, and see where you're going with this. Because, once again, once you start down that path and commit, you can't stop. If you commit the money to a consultant, unless you want to fire that person, I'm simply saying, especially with the way things are moving around here right now, we just saw that with the pandemic, how the inflation has blew through everything. We need to protect the fund balance. And if we need to postpone things for a year or slow down and do things incrementally, then that is the way to do it. If we find out we have a surge, I'll give you an example. When we're looking at the reserves, that we want to beef up the reserves, you look at the reserve policy, there was a methodical way to do that. 1 year, we allocate sales tax for $250,000, it came back at $529. So that $279,000, we stuffed them. Because we had a great surge, we had a plan in place, but we did not commit to that, and because of that, all the reserves, I think except for the trails, they had a little bit left we had to bump. But all of them were accelerated. We accelerated all the DB and DA. There is a way to do this methodically. The thing is that we talk about this here, if you want things to go perfectly, stay here. Because once you go out there, they change. We all know that with inflation. We see that. And having said that, if you don't have the funds to protect the town, you may have to borrow it, you may have to lay stuff, but keep in mind you were asked not to do this. If you do want to do this, I respect the board, I will respectfully decline, and you can move forward how you see fit as we go forward. I don't want to beat this to death because we have enough items we can do that later on. I don't want to do that. But if the 4 of you or 3 of you or 2 of you, if the majority wants to move forward with this, with that plan, okay, then let's move forward then.
Yeah, may I say one thing?
Yes.
At the last board meeting, when this was discussed, it was discussed of 100,000 to put in the budget, of 50,000 for 2024 and 50,000 for 2025. I'm just saying, in case you've forgotten that discussion from 3 weeks ago or whatever it was. And now it looks like it's just jumped to 100,000 all for 1 year, just mentioning that.
That was based on a conversation with me and John of what he thought it might cost in 2024. I think this probably will be a multi-year project still. We don't know what the numbers are going to come in at. So that's where that revision came. I had not forgotten that. We're guessing right now as to how much this costs, and we may be shocked by the sticker when we put on RFP, or we might be pleasantly surprised.
So do we add it in or not? Yes or no, time?
I think we wait.
All right, I gotta wait, Roland?
I think we should add it in.
Add in?
Yeah.
In? Okay, so the record, 3 say yes, 2 say no. Let's move on. Number 7, sewer administration and personnel services. This, we've seen this happen many times before in other departments where someone is doing work in the water. We see that with Mikey, we see it with other ones, that they're doing work in a different fund and they get paid for that. You want to elaborate on that at all, Mrs. Munson?
No, I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
So let me understand. We're not actually changing any numbers. We're just we're making a new accounting and moving money from one of the accounts into that account?
Correct. Her
Okay.
salary dollar amount is not
Okay.
changing.
Yeah,
Okay, we're okay with that?
yes.
Is that the same with number
So
8?
that covers 7, 8, and 9, doesn't it?
That's all correct,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Just moving them to
So I don't
different
want to rush,
line
once you get
items.
time to look at this, but it's just paying out of a different fund, but it's the same overall salary.
That's correct.
Yeah.
For all of them.
So 7, 8, 9, okay, all right. 10, deputy clerk's rate of pay of salary schedule was incorrect, it was listed at, okay, so this is just an accounting, but this may affect the budget a little bit, right?
No, it doesn't affect the budget, it's just on the front page.
Okay.
One of the very first pages, this page here. It was just,
We could put that in a typo.
it was a typo on here, exactly is what I was gonna say.
No harm, no foul.
But the dollar amount in all these other pages back here was figured correctly, so it does not affect the budget.
Oh, it doesn't affect the budget at all? Okay.
No.
Okay. Information aid,
Same
clerk's
thing.
office is not listed, this is number 11, right?
Is that the same thing? It was a typo somewhere and it's,
She was just left off this page right here.
oh,
Totally left off it.
Yeah.
She
it's-
was- she was
because it's a
left off,
newly-
another
It's gonna be a
typo.
new full-time
But the
position.
calculation-
But it's already in the budget.
Oh, okay.
But,
Okay.
right, in these other, 20 pages back here, she said the correct amount.
Okay.
Does it, along those lines, does it matter, should we take off the drop-in things from that schedule of salaries
Yes.
when we finalize
yes.
it? Okay.
Mhm.
So you have all these numbers, and you put it in the soup, and you churn it around, right? And at the end of the day, this is where the drum roll comes in and does, what does that do to the fund balances? I guess we're gonna go fund balance first and see what that impact is, and then we'll look at the rate and see what that is, and see what, right? Is that the second? Is that how you wanna do it?
With all the additions to the general A fund, and then the decreases as well, it would increase the amount that would be needed, or the expenditures by $24,218. So you can take that additional amount from your fund balance, or you can raise your tax rate, your tax levy.
So if you take that out of the A fund, let's say fund balance, you still have a projection that everybody does the best they can to keep within their budgets. I'm not looking at you, by the way, okay? I just passed that area. I'm not looking at anybody, okay? As far as goes. That our projection of our fund balance in a perfect world would be what at the end of next year?
Do you have that number in your Excel?
I don't think it's updated. I think it's updated through September.
I think you had some projections, didn't you, there, as far as
Yeah.
what the fund balance would be at the end of the year? I guess we just take $24,218 off it.
Yeah, and the revised tentative budget, you had already planned to build up your fund balance by 112, over 112,000. So it would drop that down by
To about 90.
24,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Down to what, Jen?
Use that.
It'd be, let's see, hang on.
Was that 88?
Yeah, something like that.
88,000?
88,474.
There we go.
Do you have a final, so you have a projected number what that would be total? I mean, the 88,000 increase? Because we're trying to get this above, what, 1 month?
Oh, you mean, what does that, that would do to the bottom
balance.
line of the fund balance? That might be on another spreadsheet.
The whole idea of this exercise of reallocating B and DB money is to build up your fund balance and protect the town from future catastrophic events, which
On the spreadsheet? I have that here.
Which wouldn't include any budget modifications from tonight.
Right. Right. Mhm. Oops.
Is this the number that he's looking for?
This is only through August.
Oh, okay.
You're looking for the fund balance
In
for the
January
projected
2020.
end
if
of
it's
this
possible,
year.
if it's possible, to look at what the projected fund balance would be when they close the books, this would probably be at the end of February, or, so, yes, when 2024 is ended. Because we want to raise it, but you said we we're going to raise 88,000.
88, yeah,
Okay.
88,474.
All right,
So right now, this is projected, right?
that's okay.
Modified budget.
At least it's going in the right direction.
So we'd be adding, what, another 80,000, so it'd be projected to be 500, so we're closer to the optimum, but not quite, so it'd be projected to be about $520,000.
Okay.
And our 25% minimum is 637.
637.
So it's closer.
It's closer to the 3 months.
Right, right. Because right now, we're at 460, projected at the end of the year to be at 460.
Moving in the right direction.
All right, so far so good. So just a heads up, we're gonna do that for the other 3 balances also.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so that's from the A fund. Then we have was there anything affected in the DA fund? I
I don't think we did any
think
DA
so.
changes, did we?
No, I'm just reviewing out loud, so everybody has.
Yeah, I don't think we changed anything in DA.
No.
Nothing in DA.
A, B.
B, it says it right there in item 6, it tells you what happens.
Right, because it's just the one change.
So item 6, it was, you take $100,000 out of the B fund,
Yep.
and so that would decrease it by 100,000. Do you have once again,
It says it's about 400,000.
once again, Mary Ellen, would you
Yeah.
just take a moment?
Mm-hmm. So the B fund is healthy. So right now, projected at the end of the year is 734,000. I'm rounding. The 50% optimum is 298. So again, very, very healthy. But we're going to be taking 377,000 from that. So the 734 minus the 377.
That's half.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so then you're down to 377, and you have, your 6 months would be 298.
Yep.
And then what do you do next year when you have to balance the budget again?
Yeah, that's, I mean, yes, it's healthy, but we can't be spending like that. Like if you think the following year, you're gonna need another $100,000 to finish the zoning. I mean, now you're getting down to, we don't wanna make the B fund unhealthy.
Well, not only that, but you're reallocating some of the sales tax money to move into the A and the DA. You won't have that option, or very little option next year to do the same, which
Right.
means your A and your DA are gonna have to go up significantly,
Yeah, yeah. This,
unless you cut services. Right?
Yeah.
You either spend more or you spend less, right? You
Yeah.
either raise more money or you spend less.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important for people to listen. These are what your options are.
Right. Keeping in mind, I mean, at the budget meeting when we kept highlighting that, you know, this plan only works to, you know, kind of reallocate and rebalance these fund balances more equitably, only works if we stick to the budget and that we're not overspending.
So nothing from DB or DA?
No.
Okay, so we have a vision of where this is gonna go, what the options are, and go from there, okay? Any other comments or questions before I think we move on?
I did want to talk in executive session about,
We will.
okay,
But that's,
before we
We will.
approve this.
before we approve this, that means you wanna have everybody go out?
Or we can go into another room.
Because approving this will also authorize preparation and filing of the preliminary budget.
Oh, okay.
And so if there's stuff that needs to be talked about before that happens.
But the
that's-
preliminary budget, you can still change it.
I
Am I
understand.
correct?
I'd like to get some
I
clarification.
understand that, but you can still change it.
Yes, you can still
All
change
right.
it.
Does the rest of the board also want to have everyone leave?
Or we can go in another room, which we've done before.
Which room would you like to go in, Joe?
We went in that room behind Pat's office, that's what we did last time.
So why don't we do a timeout?
Isn't it a short break?
And,
But-
turn this off, and someone.
Well, we have to know why we're doing this.
And then turn it off, so who wants to make a motion?
I'll second.
Okay, well, we need to know
Why?
you need to state why you're making these motions. You don't even know what you've stated. You haven't stated anything.
It doesn't matter, we just need to state it. We just need to go.
We're going into executive session to discuss the highway department's, what do you call
We're
it?
talking about, we're discussing a contract negotiation.
Yes,
Collective bargaining.
Yeah.
collective bargaining. Thank you.
we need with us?
Okay, so,
Let her finish up.
okay, so we've got a motion to go executive session to discuss collective bargaining issue, and now, who is going to make that motion? Joe? Who's going to second it? Ruth? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That was at
All right. So now we're gonna move,
7:56.
we're gonna shut that off.